valid, and we have to respect the agreements.
Unless we have newer agreements.
Unless you have newer agreements.
Which
yes.
could be as broad as they are now, or would you say it needs to be more specific?
The arms monitoring agreement is one of the more specific agreements. Mm-hmm. And this is an agreement that had a monitoring body with it. So the Joint Monitoring Coordination Committee, which brings together the Nepal Army and the Maoist Army and is chaired by UNMIN, meets routinely like clockwork, and its aim is to get problems resolved at the lowest possible level, to stop them mushrooming into bigger political issues. And that is what we do.
And how do you address the accusations of UNMIN being pro-Maoist?
We try to address them up front, which is why it's a great opportunity to come and speak like this. These accusations are not new. You know, my predecessor was routinely accused of being a Maoist.
And I also remember him attending a function where Maoist leaders were there in a cantonment, mm-hmm. and they had a full military parade going on, which was mm-hmm. which should not have been taking place. I mean, it was not in Martin, but his other officers were there. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. There's been a lot of discussion about what is appropriate and what is not. But let me say a word about why I think some of these misunderstandings are there. And the first is the concept of monitoring. What is the monitoring role of UNMIN? There is an expectation on the part of many that monitoring is closer to control, to policing, to enforcement. Every time a Maoist is found outside a cantonment with a UN-registered weapon, it is, UNMIN, how could you have allowed that to happen? Well, UNMIN is not in a position to prevent any of the parties breaching the peace agreements.
But you're supposed to sound an alarm.
You know, when someone walks out of a cantonment with a weapon in their hand, if you've seen the cantonments, you will understand that these are not hermetically sealed mm-hmm. spaces. We get involved as soon as we hear there is an allegation of breach, and we look into it. But preventing breaches is really in the hands of the parties. A lot of these agreements are based on a high level of trust.
I would agree
and
to
a
that.
remarkable
I mean,
aspect of the process.
You may not be policing it, but when somebody breaches that, you're accused of failing to sound an alarm.
Why is that? I think that's an unfair criticism, because we do take up every allegation of breach when it happens. This is also where some of the misunderstanding comes in. When UNMIN goes to the police station or the CDO to look into what happened, the story tends to be UNMIN came to bail out the Maoist, to protect, you know. But I think we're a pretty equal opportunity critic. When there is a violation, we always take it up. We always try to resolve it, of course, in a satisfactory way to both parties. And this is also where the JMCC gets involved. But if you look back to something like the Kapilvastu incident, which was a serious breach, as soon as we learned about that, we said this is a very serious violation. And we followed through, we took it up in JMCC. But let me add one more reason to why I think UNMIN comes under criticism, and this is probably an understandable one. UNMIN is associated with the peace process as a whole, and now 3.5 years down the line, there are people who are not happy with the way things have turned out. So like it or not, we are associated with that process, and there is only a peace process as long as the Maoists remain engaged. We see as part of our role remaining engaged with all the actors in the peace process. And that does lead us to criticism.
So you would say that UNMIN unintentionally staying for this long? You mandate.
It has not been UNMIN's intention to stay this long,
yeah.
And we have never, as some people say, courted controversy. We certainly don't court controversy. We court solutions, but it's inevitable that controversy comes up.
Let's also briefly talk about UNMIN's relations with the government. Mm-hmm. Government was not, mm-hmm. the present government mm-hmm. was not too happy when you refused to disclose some of the details that mm-hmm. government needed. Mm-hmm.
There were two different issues on the table. One was the personal data relating to the Maoist army personnel, where if you look at the arms monitoring agreement, UNMIN is explicitly tasked with treating that information with appropriate confidentiality. We are bound by that. So we were in extensive discussions with the government to understand what the problem was and how it could be addressed. In other words, we were very solution-oriented. A second issue was how many Maoists are in the cantonments. That's an entirely legitimate question, and that is up to the Maoists to say. And it took us far too long, it took the Maoists far too long to come up with that response in the JMCC. Now, at the root of the problem from the government side was who is being paid in the cantonments. You know, there were uncertainties about whether people were still there, about whether the right people were being paid. And I'm very pleased to say that we were able to work with the Maoists and the government to resolve the payments question. And just in these days, a fresh round of payment has been completed in all the cantonment site. And I understand, you know, the Peace Minister, Rakam Chemjong, went to the beginning of the payment and went to the end in the last cantonment. And there seems to be full satisfaction on the government side now with the way.
Government is completely satisfied with
That's what we understand. So I'm very pleased that this has been.
They've explicitly said so?
I understand the Peace Minister has said that he's satisfied with the process. That's good enough for me.
That's good enough. And I hope that government remains satisfied with you and you're able to do what you came for within the time you've been given right now.
It's critical to our work that we remain on good terms with all the actors in the peace process. I will certainly do my part for that. And part of that is keeping open lines of communication with everyone and making UNMIN's work as transparent as it can be.
We hope it really helps and our peace process comes to a conclusion. Thank you very much.
That is our fervent hope as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That was Ms. Karin Landgren, Chief of UNMIN, talking to us. News continues at Kantipur TV, but for now, goodbye.